Welcome back to the APSCC 2021 webinar series. I'm Christopher Slaughter, your MC for the series. Today, global operators in the Asia-Pacific region. Continuing with our operators series, today, Pacom Réveillon from Euroconsult is the moderator, and he's joined by Christophe Cazès from Eutelsat, Harsh Verma from SES, and Terry Bleakley from Intelsat for a look at the latest trends in the industry and forecasts for what to expect from 2021 and beyond.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Very happy to welcome you to this new webinar series from APSCC on the topic of global satellite operators. So very happy to talk today in this very dynamic environment in our overall space industry, including very much in Asia. And so to have with me today, Terry Bleakley, Senior Vice President, Asia Pacific for Intelsat, Christophe Caz, Regional Vice President for Eutelsat, and Harsh Verma, Sales Director, India and Southeast Asia at SES Network. So prior to that, we'd just like to say hello, whether you're based out of Asia, Europe, North America, anywhere else. Happy to have you on board with us. So maybe prior we get into a number of the session on the dynamics for the industry here and the way forward. I would like to invite you maybe to share some of your, some of the initiatives, milestone achievements, or your respective companies' environment. As there's so much happening, I think it's good to have a very quick catch up from each of you on your respective companies. So maybe Terry, if you would like to give us some first comments.
Thanks, Pacom, and thanks APSCC for inviting us to speak today. We hope everyone out there in Ethernet land is safe. It's been a really busy time, as you're suggesting. The last 6 months have seen incredible efforts within our organisation, and I'll just talk to 4 of those initially. C-band clearing in North America is very important for our organisation to clear 300 megahertz for the 5G operators, that accelerated clearing. We've ordered 7 satellites for that. We've ordered equipment on the ground, filters, compression equipment, and that's all very much going to plan. It's very much part of our focus to ensure we keep on schedule there and everything is green, looking good. We've started to build out our next generation software-defined network. Part of that has been issuing an order on Airbus for 2 software-defined satellites, but it's not just the software-defined satellite, it's the network on the ground, the planning of that, which then enables the flexibility of the software-defined payloads. That's a second big initiative that we've been working on the past few months. The third has been the integration of GoGo commercial aviation into Intelsat. So some of you may know we acquired GoGo Commercial Aviation for $400 million late last year. It's now fully integrated into the organisation, and that integration was a key initiative that we've been working on. It'll have impact in Asia. GoGo is the largest provider of IFC in the world, with around 3,200 planes connected, around 800 on backlog. And they include, aircraft in Asia, Japan Airlines, Cathay Pacific, both their Hong Kong and China organisations, and Virgin in Australia. And we look to increase their presence through our global footprint as we move forward. I think the last one is, we don't celebrate enough moments of science, these major feats that we have in the industry. We've become quite complacent that we are working in a pretty amazing industry, a pretty cool industry. And on the 12th of April, we had our aging satellite, TNO2, and it's situated 1 degree west. It provides video services, broadband services to Europe, Africa, and South America. It's 17 years old, running out of fuel, and we used Mission Extension Vehicle 2 to attach to that satellite to provide station keeping while the satellite provides the payload and it was a live interaction. So back in February 2020, we used the first Grumthorpe mission extension vehicle, and that was successful, but we took the satellite payload off. We took it to a graveyard orbit, and we did the maneuver in the graveyard orbit. What was different about 12th of April was it was done with a live payload with no interruption to services. That was an amazing feat. You've got these two satellites traveling at over 11,000 kilometers per hour, 36,000 kilometers from Earth, and we attach them. A nozzle goes into the engine nozzle, and then a hand expands and connects to this device. It takes over the maneuvering of the satellite while the payload is still live. Amazing feat. So, we're really pleased with that. A lot of happy customers, a lot of nervous customers, and what a great feat. That's it from us.
Thanks a lot, Terry. Certainly a lot of technology breakthrough, and we'll come back to a few of them and their impact. I take the opportunity to mention, being in France today, that our astronaut was supposed to leave to space today. It's postponed to tomorrow, but certainly quite a big thing here in France. Anyway, back to the topic. Sorry for this. Christophe from Eutelsat Perspective.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting us as well. Obviously, we are currently in the last quarter of our fiscal year. As you know, we are 1st of July to 30th of June fiscal year, so obviously a bit busy and in the middle of the budget for next year. But in terms of news at Eutelsat, we have recently placed some orders to replace some satellites. One of them was 36D position recently. In the last 6 to 12 months, we've been quite busy as well with the launch of Connect Africa to integrate. As you know, we have verticalized a bit this business, and we have bought over our European distributor called BitBlue. So it was obviously a big achievement for us because it was really a change of, I would say, business model, mixing a bit in some countries in Africa, some retail model with wholesale business. So this has been something that has been quite, I would say, time consuming, and obviously showing us a big growth for the years to come. And we are getting prepared to launch the first generation of software-defined satellite, what we call Quantum internally, by the end of the year. So a lot of activities around this at this stage, I would say.
Thanks a lot, Christophe, and Ash for SES.
Yeah, so I'll talk about, firstly, the 2020, how SES networks performed. So we had an underlying revenue growth. Networks grew for the third consecutive years at 5.3%. And in terms of contribution, big contribution came from the mobility sector, which is under a bit of a pressure now, but they did contribute a lot in 2020, first half, and driven by growth in fixed data for networks. In terms of big efforts internally, like Terry said, C-band clearing is a huge effort, and SES is focused towards an accelerated schedule on it, and replacement satellites have been ordered. What we are also focused towards is launch of our SES-17 high throughput satellites over Americas, and launch of our first 3 satellites on the next generation MEO mPOWER later this year. And the partner ecosystem that we're developing on mPOWER is going at full throttle. We have to have 8 to 9 gateways operational. So we are signing gateway partners. We've signed one in Greece with OTE, the carrier there, and Pivotal in Australia, just outside Sydney. So the Australian gateway will serve the Australasia and the Pacific market, while the Greece gateway will serve Europe and North Africa. What we've also done in terms of our partnership is a lot of focus is towards cloud. So you might have heard about SES cloud relationship and our partnership that we announced with Microsoft Azure. And it has multiple reasons to why we are going there. It's also just that we are investing heavily in cloud ourselves as an organization, in terms of our processes, in terms of managing this complex hardware, software resources across the globe, and in future, the software-defined satellites, mPOWER, and so on. And of course, we also see our customers showing huge appetite for cloud application consumption. And in terms of some key, I would say, wins, so there is a lot of work and a lot of hand-holding in the last, I would say, 6 to 9 months that we spent with our customers and ensuring they tide over the difficult times. And we had to share some pain with our customers. Happy to say that we've been able to retain almost 100% of them, even through this difficult time. But it is bouncing back as life is starting to limp back to normalcy, I would say. Some of the wins that we have announced in Q1 this year are with Bhakti in Indonesia, where we have seen that although the USO projects were delayed last year, they are now being accelerated. So Dwi Tunggal Putra service provider in Indonesia, we're doing services with them on our HTS, SES-12, and recently concluded with our earlier partner, TeleGlobal, for leased capacity 2 project with Bhakti. And also, I mean, we are now partnering with fiber cable systems just to ensure that we continue our MEO services into the Pacific Island. One such partnership that we've announced is Southern Cross Cable. And we're continuing to see, I mean, growth in the mining sector as well in the Asia region.
Thanks, Arsh, and I think it's quite of a good introduction to actually our first, my first question, and maybe our first discussion topic. So about obviously kind of the growth dynamics in Asia, and obviously Asia being diverse as we always say, so it's more like market to market than a global thing, but maybe thinking of the last 18 months and the way forward. I mean, I may have a question after a bit more on the C-band that you already mentioned, but so if we look at the dynamics that you've seen here, either some delays Arch mentioned in some installation or project maybe in the last 12 months, but as well, if you see some shifts that maybe you see in other market in terms of public policies around broadband or cloud or digitization of some business. I mean, what you see in the market, whether COVID is okay, it's just recovery back to normal and so forth, or whether it is more changing some of the priorities or requests from the clients. Maybe Terry, if you have some comments on your views.
Yeah, okay. So it's quite a broad question. I think during the pandemic, we've shown that our business, and I think it's true of all three of us who are talking, is resilient. During the period, we support multiple segments. We've seen the network segment struggle in the sense of when we're doing installations and getting equipments into country and getting experts to help deliver those equipment get delayed, but we're also seeing the profile and traffic patterns change, going from metros to more remote areas. And with the satellite capability being able to be moved pretty quickly to where the requirement is, we've been able to sort of gain business around that sort of thing. I think in the media business, the biggest challenge over the past 18 months really has been with our occasional use business, particularly for the first 6 months. Sports events were cancelled. People really weren't sure how to run events. Olympics being delayed a year, so that definitely had an impact on our occasional use business. But overall, our full-time video business was resilient during that period. When we look at mobility, 2 areas of mobility were affected: our cruise business and our connecting of aircraft, just with the lack of international travel. So, working with our partners in those segments were really important. Some of them went into bankruptcy or Chapter 11, so working them out of that, finding deals was a big part of what we're doing. And I think in other parts of mobility, we didn't see a drop. We didn't see really much of a drop in merchant. We still saw our flex network increasing over time. So it wasn't really affecting those levels in the maritime segment. I think as we move forward, we are seeing still growth in cellular backhaul. This year, we've signed extensions and increases of capacity with KDDI in Japan, and that's being used because of different traffic profiles that they're experiencing and some disaster recovery requirements they've got. We're just doing an implementation. We go from Japan, which has a massive population, to the Marshall Islands, where we're doing a 2G install and we're converting that to a 3G install. So the extremes are still seeing the need for connectivity, and we see that growing over time. For the enterprise network market, it's interesting. The telcos seem to be interested in managed services again. I think the profile of satellite, just due to the amount of noise that's coming from NGSOs, is just raising profile. And people in these satellite divisions are being asked by senior management, what are we doing in this area? This has led to positive things for Intelsat. PCCW Global just signed up as a Flex Enterprise partner for us for providing connectivity to remote offices for MNOs they support. Telstra, in the last 2 weeks, have signed a similar agreement with us for managed services for their enterprise customers. So we're seeing a resurrection in telcos and their interest in satellite, which is great. I think when you look at the maritime space, some of the statistics are staggering around fishing boats. There's over 2.6 million fishing boats in the world, but a lot of those are below 12 meters, which we probably aren't that interested in. But the number that are between like 12 to 24 meters are 340,000. So that's a lot of vessels out there, and we're getting a lot of interest for connectivity. So we've got our Flex Maritime product, and we've just introduced a 45 centimeter antenna to Korean manufacturers are supporting that, KNS and Italian. So those 45 centimeter antennas are sort of at the lower merchant level, the fishing industry and recreational vehicles. And we see a lot of interest in fisheries in Asia. Fishing and food is a big part of the Asian diet, and that's seeing opportunities there. And along with that, we're seeing some of those markets that have been very closed around maritime opening up. The IFMC licensing that have been granted in India recently have enabled us for a first time to be able to offer managed services to Indian flag vessels moving through the Indian waters. So our Flex node goes live in Delhi in the next month, which is fantastic for us. So there's a new market for us that we couldn't attend to before. And in the aviation sector, I can see you wanting to.
I think, well, just to share time, I think we'll come back to aviation maybe in a minute as a specific question and an ecosystem for maritime. So, I mean, Christophe, in the meantime, with these similar things, I think you had an agreement quite recently announced, for example, in Chatham Islands. So islands are fine. They're also all neighbors. So I assume that as one of them is trying to get up to speed on whatever broadband you can deliver, there is certainly also, I think, either an appreciation also of countries or new standards or what could be the minimum, broadband or universal access in the country. Indonesia was certainly, I think, Bhakti has been mentioned earlier by Arsh as kind of a big player or has done a lot of push, but they're not the only one. So maybe some of your views on dynamics here.
Sure. So obviously the trends that have been mentioned by Terry, we have obviously observing the same. I think a lot of trends were pre-COVID, and I think they have only been accelerated under COVID. Backhauling is definitely one of them. You mentioned about Chatham Islands and so on. The push to managed services is exactly what we've been asked in this project. So this is something obviously that we try to encourage, which is obviously a bit of a challenge for, I guess, all of us, because managed services is very much different from selling media huts. So skill-wise and so on, we need to either retrain or hire new breed and new competencies within our organization. So I think that's something which is quite important. The government project around USO have been obviously quite delayed. You're saying you mentioned about Bacti now catching up, but I think the biggest disappointment for us in the region has been very much the Philippines. It has been extremely slow, in terms of reaction vis-a-vis the marketplace. You know that 40% of the countries is definitely not covered by internet, because of the duopoly that there is currently. There's a third operator coming ditto into the country. So now we see a bit of waking up from their side, and DICT, which is the ministry in charge of this, has been already awarding some of the lot to provide connectivity to 40,000 schools in Indonesia. In the Philippines. So this is something that we feel quite hopeful about to get some strong growth in this area. So the consumer broadband to us in the future will be something quite interesting to look into. Obviously, with all the great expertise that we have back in Europe and in Africa, we think that it could be quite useful for us in this part of the world, obviously.
Thank you. And Ash, would you, in general, agree with the comments, or are there one or two, specific growth areas or dynamics you would like to highlight or stress in the region?
Generally, I agree. With the comments. We experience the same thing, that the mobility verticals were affected the most. The aeronautical and both the cruise sector. But we've also seen that I think the benefit of all of us being global satellite operators are that we were able to structure contracts. They were moving their assets. For example, Royal Caribbean Cruise moved their vessels to Asia, and we were able to move the beams and restructure the contract in a way that they use the capacity here. So we were able to manage. There was a lot of hand-holding required during the COVID phase, but we were able to escape through. I think it is on the verge of now bouncing back, especially our partnership with Rockwell Collins on the BizJet, which has been kind of slow because of the COVID impact, but it will bounce back now. And like Terry said, right, the IFMC licenses in India has given some sort of a hope for us to stitch together a solution for both the maritime and the aeronautical vertical. But just to say, during the COVID phase, what we experienced was also an increase. MNOs pretty much remain resilient in terms of the network requirements. I think more and more people move to tier 2, tier 3 towns where satellite is pretty much utilized. We saw an uptick in demand. Case in point, Timor Telecom upgraded their capacity by 3 times. During COVID. The other Telemore in Timor again upgraded twice to what they were contracted. And we also received a significant upgrade from Telenor in Myanmar. So we had huge growth on the MEO customer side. The mobility vertical, we had to restructure contracts. But now, post-COVID, what we're seeing, the government projects, which were, of course, the government focus shifted towards healthcare and infrastructure and the vaccine rollouts and so on and so forth. Now the government is focusing towards the digital infrastructure. The projects are being accelerated. I agree with Christoph, DICT in Philippines has been slow, but we are now seeing light at the end of the tunnel. We're already working with one of the partners and starting to deliver a project in next month for one of the DICT projects. A similar thing we see in Malaysia with MCMC and Sarawak Multimedia Agency. Number of projects that been announced in the last 2 months. Huge capacity demand there. Then Bhakti has been, of course, in the forefront in terms of launching such projects, and it continues to grow. Other than that, I think our 4G and the 5G is the biggest driver. So a lot of talk and a lot of discussions with mobile operators about 5G trials, what their 5G strategy should look like, how can we play a role in their infrastructure, and those plans are being drawn out. But really, there is a shift towards managed network services from these MNOs, and MNOs want the satellite operators to have more skin in the game to deliver end-to-end services and back this up with a solid SLA.
Yeah, and I think, well, maybe it's leading to my next comment, and Terry, you might comment in the context of IRO, but not only. So, I mean, from all your comments, that direction of either managed capacity to end-to-end services is taking shape, maybe quite differently depending on the verticals. But I mean, I think Eutelsat decided to go for Big Blue also as a view that it was a way to accelerate market growth, I believe, in Europe, at least in that case, and beyond, or get skills. SES has done it very much between managed or even further services to cruise. For Intelsat, obviously, GoGo commercial airline acquisition is a major move there. So just thinking of the ecosystem, but really focusing also on Asia, where obviously the market has historically made of different countries, regulations, go-to-market approaches. So how does this play into the markets you serve here, and how do you see this ecosystem of partner, or how it would transition from the traditional capacity to SP agreement and then get into the market, or telcos to something more managed, or where the operators will get more into service, and what are the benefits ultimately, or what do you expect in terms of growth acceleration from that move? So maybe
let's just talk.
Yep.
Yeah, well, let's focus first of all on vertical integration and why people do it and what it means. And there's different levels of vertical integration. You can go very deep or not so deep. But the effect is to become more efficient, to control the service, the solution more, and to give a better customer experience. So with the GoGo acquisition for the commercial aviation business, GoGo understand that market segment inside out. They lead that market segment with the connectivity of aircraft. They have intellectual property associated with their solutions. They've got an amazing antenna, the 2KU, which they've developed in collaboration with ThinCom. But they don't know, it's not really part of their DNA to operate a global satellite network. And that was the opportunity for us, because that's core what we do, operating a global network. We've been doing it with Flex for the last 3 years, and I'll talk to that in a moment. So it was a beautiful marriage, we believe, where we then took over the control of that network. Over time, it becomes more of an Intelsat network, and we focus on what we know, and then we take the expertise from the GoGo team, who are integrated now into our organisation, and go after that segment a lot more aggressively, fighting others who are vertically integrated in that segment, including Viasat and Inmarsat. And there's also a lot of synergies from what they're doing with their managed service for aircraft that we can take along to our Flex services. We're seeing a lot of things that they've developed that can move across to Flex. What does it do for the ecosystem partners, which is part of your question? Well, I think because of the level of our integration, Galat still are an important supplier to this network. ThinCom are an important supplier to this network. That doesn't change. What does change is the satellite operators that used to provide capacity to this network over time will have less importance. What it means to the partners we sell to, well, it's not a really competitive market. There are 3 players apart from Viasat and Inmarsat that sell into this market, which are Panasonic and Global Eagle. Now, that they are both customers of Intelsat. We had conversations with them as soon as we made the announcement about GoGo, and we still continue to provide services to them and work with them. So I think it's manageable when we're not talking about lots of players. I think when it comes to Flex, important to the success of Flex has been developing a channel partner strategy, which has been quite new for us, and developing service providers that can then add value. We provide the infrastructure, the iDirect equipment, the satellite network, and then they can configure their service and contend it even further by having access through an API into our interface. And so, we've been learning a lot about channel management, about channel conflict, not to saturate the market. And it's been an interesting learning exercise, but we've got over 6,000 sites on our different Flex networks, whether it be Flex Maritime, Flex Enterprise, and it continues to grow. So, we think something's kind of working there. And, with the latest sort of telcos getting very interested in them, in these networks, it's sort of feeding them into a place where we haven't been for some time.
Thanks. And Christoph, maybe jumping on the question. So, as mentioned, Eutelsat acquired, for example, Big Blue in Europe. Obviously, situation in Asia might be different depending on fragmentation on the different markets or the requirement here. So, maybe your view and maybe jumping on one comment from Terry, actually, with the managed service, is it changing the relationship with existing channel partners, or is it also bringing certain new channel partners in the ecosystem that were not maybe part of it before because they were not like satellite service provider in the traditional meaning?
Sure. So you mentioned obviously the issues linked to a regulatory environment. So in most of the countries in Asia, we have obviously a need for licenses. So as far as we are concerned, we are obliged to work with our channel partners of today, because that's the only way we can access to those markets and so on. So we tend to not disturb currently, obviously, and we don't have a plan for it actually, to get away from the current partners. I think we are trying to identify new business partners. Obviously, originally and traditionally, we're going mostly for VSAT operator, but we are trying to identify a bit of other partner profile and so on. And the reason why we are doing this and the way we are doing this is to spend a bit more time with the end user, because we tend to evangelize a bit more, try to understand more what the end user wants, not because we want to go direct, but because we want to define services of the future, which are more in demand with what these guys are looking at. So we still need to have obviously channel partners and the ones that we have currently, but we try to identify new ones that mostly the end user may be willing to, will be more IT guys, because obviously more and more things will be going cloud oriented. The networks are becoming more and more hybrid. So I think that terrestrial is becoming as important, obviously, for B2T services than the satellite piece. So this is something which is quite a bit new for us. So we have a bit more pre-sales activity from this perspective towards the end user. And then we may have to redefine a bit new business partner, as you mentioned a bit earlier.
Okay, that's interesting for sure. So Ash, as you mentioned, I mean, SES has that as well, slightly differentiated strategy, but very much in the direction of managed services as well. So yeah, in terms of your ecosystem and how is this playing in the Asian region, obviously, or in certain of the large markets where you deliver services, would it be typically India, Indonesia, others?
Right. So see, vertical integration, is probably a necessity for all of us. Really to differentiate ourselves and avoid real commoditization, which is today, because of the HTSs, there is a feel of this commoditization with customers. So our ambition is also really to a new coined term is VISNO, right? Vertically integrated satellite network operator, is to step to that direction. And how we are doing it, firstly, like Christoph said, right? Regulatory wise, we're partnering with in-country licensed operators who become really our eyes and ears on the ground. We invest in the teleport infrastructure with them, and that is very common for the high throughput satellites. So we build a gateway in Jakarta for the Bhakti phase 1. We are now building one in Malaysia. We just built one in Dubai as well. So all this infrastructure investments is going in, which makes us our relationship and bond very strong with the local players. and also then getting into, the platform development. So we work with everyone. We're vendor agnostic in terms of our platform choices. For mobility, we work with iDirect, but then Hughes, Gillard, and Nutex and Comtex of the world. We make sure we are investing heavily in that side as well, both in Malaysia, Indonesia, and other regions, and really stitching together an end-to-end service for the end customers. Where we are heading towards, with Empower, of course, our focus is now cloud. Microsoft Azure, partnership. They are a channel partner as well, so they are bringing us a lot of opportunities to us from their enterprise customers, where they're seeing satellite as agnostic in terms of medium, and with our medium earth orbit services becoming more and more seamless in terms of fiber experience that their enterprise customers enjoy. And the other thing we are doing on Empower is the flat panel antennas, are really partnering with these guys, because we need to make sure we have the most cost optimum and efficient system available when Empower is launched next year.
Thank you. And maybe so I would like to move also to the question of the competitive environment. Maybe before then, and for the benefit of the audience, to try to give a couple of reference points, if possible. So, Terry, if we talk about the aero market, for example, I think, well, penetration is still certainly not 100% of the aircraft flying in Asia. Gogo has been present for a number of years with several airlines, but I assume there's still it's quite of a growth market for sure. Well, beyond the COVID and when travel is reauthorized for the largest part. Can you give us a sense of the opportunity side there, in terms of the capacity for an aircraft or the market to address in the region as you see it? In a very quick, like 1 minute, headline on that. Yeah.
Look, I think it's a massive market to address. We see double-digit growth. We see all of those who analyse that market as you come out of COVID, whether it's 2023 or 2024, where we get back to normal flying levels, it's going to be double-digit growth. The models that Gogo are implementing in the US with T-Mobile, which gives a seamless experience for a customer when they get on an aircraft, is something we're taking in Asia to the MNOs. And that's getting a lot of interest. So you get on a plane, you've got your phone, you don't have to do it remains connected. You don't have to connect to another server, and you get a seamless experience. So we'll be bringing that sort of stuff out. And it's not just commercial aviation, because there's a lot of airlines here that still need connectivity. And it's not just for connecting people on the seats. We think the connected aircraft is going to bring a lot of business. And I often talk about this connected aircraft and the potential there. But there's also business aviation, which is in commercial aviation, and that has been resilient during COVID. People have been traveling on private aircraft rather than getting onto commercial aircraft because they've been able to, right? And the numbers are small. So we see business jet also being another area which we will sort of relaunch, and we see a lot of interest in that segment.
I think as you mentioned for fishing vessels, I think part of the opportunity also lies with the ability to have the small antenna equipment. I mean, business aviation is about very different models, obviously, but part of the big opportunities, I think, also goes through the equipment and having something.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So the antenna that's being developed at the moment is a tail-mounted antenna for the business jet aircraft. We're working with Satcom Direct there. It's that they know that market very well. So it's going to be exciting as we move more into that business jet market as well. But commercial aviation still has massive growth. It's double-digit as you go up, and Asian airlines have got a bit of catching up to do, and having our presence here and the knowledge that we've got from Gogo will create great opportunity there.
Thanks. And Christoph, maybe if we talk about some terrestrial networks or broadband access, and if you look at some of the opportunity or broadband you delivered, I mean, in terms of bandwidth, in some of the new requirements or network deployment, is there a step change in the data rate required per site, or what kind of the growth or typical requirement you could see, or because we talk about either 4G growth that Ash mentioned. So in practice, if we think, okay, many networks yesterday were, I don't know, 1 megabit per second or 2, is it today about 5 or 6 or 10 or whatever idea on the growth patterns or potential you see in bandwidth demand?
So today I can only speak based on what my colleagues are doing back in Africa and so on, but it's more linked to the quality of service. And obviously, right now we're working, as you know, on many countries, and we're opening up our own stores actually in Southern African countries. So speed is important, but more important for these countries are reliability. And this is, I think, the main motto of our marketing is to make sure that we have reliability. We're getting as close as possible to fiber in some areas and so on. I think on the price point, we are becoming extremely aggressive and obviously getting some strong growth in this area. So we believe that speed is going to be important, but more important than speed will be reliability at this stage. So that's a bit of what we are trying to achieve right now. And not only looking at B2C, but more and more enterprise markets in those areas and SMEs, which are obviously quite critical for us to piggyback on, I would say.
And I think it goes all the way from prepaid cards in some places for B2C to actually, SMEs or direct access for some others.
And we are trying, as you know, to talk to some, I would say, traditional telcos to provide the ubiquity of services so that we are complementing their offering and so on. I think some of them are coming into the fray right now, but sometimes justifying to go for the last 10 or 20% of the markets may not be all the time very exciting for them, but they understand now, especially in the context of COVID, that ubiquity of service is going to be even becoming more of a strong request from governments. And you have seen recently the agreement that we have signed with Orange for France and for Telecom Italia in Italy was actually driven by pure USO requirements in those countries.
Yeah, definitely. So and Ash, a bit of the same question in terms of the kind of bandwidth requirement or the changes. I mean, you mentioned about maritime or cruise, but as well, for example, backhaul requirements. So, do you see of a change in the either data volume or speeds either observed on the network right now or on the request from the client?
Yeah, so the number of changes we're seeing. So on the MEO services, which generally doing core network backhauls for the Pacific Islands per se, the requirements have shot up. And because the 4G, I mean, just the mobile data consumption has really shot through the roof for them. And when we shift to, and then there are certain cables that have reached Pacific Islands. So maybe 5 years ago, the business case never existed for that island to have a fiber. And then O3B started the service, and suddenly the business case started to become. So we did, I would say, cannibalize some of our own business by making the business case viable for fibers. So fibers have arrived. What we're trying to do now is make sure we have some sort of a load sharing mechanism with fiber and building a hybrid solution with SD-WAN built in, or moving our capacity to more inland for their in-country backhauls. In terms of the 3G, 4G backhauls, we are seeing the uptick. I mean, on the MEO side, Telenor Myanmar has seen growth. Ooredoo Myanmar has seen growth, which is Ooredoo Myanmar uses the Geo capacity while Telenor is the MEO customer. Obviously, Myanmar now is undergoing some political situation, but before that, we had phenomenal growth there. I think the overall consumption-wise, data consumption-wise, Asia is leading the pack. And I mean, in India, for instance, I think usage-wise, it's going to be Indian consumers are using more than 2 GB a day. And which is probably the highest in the world. And and Philippines and Indonesia are no far behind. So 4G backhauling capacity requirements will go up. but obviously it requires a price point. So the business case is not incremental, and we have to make sure that the a business case closes for MNOs. How are we doing that? So today we are also building business models which are volume-based billing. So rather than charge customer in megabits, we charge them in gigabytes and or terabytes. So they have a terabyte commitment depending on how many top-ups or data cards they sell throughout the country, and they use the capacity as a pool. So there are some intelligent business cases being built now.
Okay, I could ask forever and also about cloud operations. Maybe one quick question before really moving to kind of the competitive environment. C-band, I think, Terry, you were the first to mention about the US. So within Asia, I would not say it's not uniform, but several countries have started to look at C-band sharing or using part of it for 5G. I think Thailand, Malaysia shall be example there. So how do you see this question playing into the Asian market and well, around video distribution for a good part, but also still data networks? How does that come into play, or would you work with the clients or any impact?
So we have a regulatory group in Asia, and they are often used as consultants to the regulators because of what we've been doing in the US. So we've been advising, for example, in India at the moment, they're looking at 3.6 to 3.7 to be used for 5G with either 20 megahertz or 30 megahertz guard band. And we've been providing a lot of information to them on the guard band we're using in the US, the type of filters we're using in the US, etc. So we are consulting, we are looking at the markets very carefully. No one seems to be going over 3.7 apart from Mongolia. And we comfort our customers by introducing proper filter systems and having a guard band. It doesn't matter, and if it goes up to 680, it doesn't matter where you are above 3.7 if you're using the proper filter systems. Your services will operate just as normal. So it's a matter of providing comforts with customers from experience that we've done with our own trials, and also educating regulators. And so we've been playing a very active role in doing that.
Thank you. Would you agree with that in general, Christopher Arsh? In which case, I would move to the next one. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, on the environment, it's been mentioned already. Obviously, a lot is about the innovation and also in the network part. Will it be flexible, digital payloads for geosystems, but also very much as well the various NGSO programs or initiatives that can have very different development stages today, depending on the ones you look at. So obviously, in theory and in practice, it can represent a lot of organizations or more global, let's say, networks coming into Asia and a lot of capacity, but also demand stimulation in the next maybe, 2-3 years. We already talked as well about regulation, market access, and so forth. So how do you see this market and this landscape evolving? At least in the next 3 years, maybe 10 years might be a bit long in the ICT industry, I guess. But yeah. So your views in how things would impact you would expect, or how to differentiate in that environment, whatever.
If I may, yeah. So look, Asia, is home to more than 50% of the world's population, right? This will be the growth engine, for 4G and 5G demand. But we also have to take into impact the economic parity, right? It's the amount of data that the South Asian or a Southeast Asian consumer consumes is much high, but at a very, very low rate. So satellites have to evolve, and I think with the HTSs and the NGSOs, that evolution is taking place. Asia will. I mean, I was reading a report, I think, from BCG, which says about I think there will be 5 terabits of capacity delivered in by 2024 to Asia, and most of it will come, from the LEOs and the MEOs. So I would say, Asia will lead the chart. In terms of bandwidth consumption, really with 4G and 5G leading. We will, but Asia is fragmented. There's just so many satellite operators. We are one of the few global operators, but then there are regional operators, government-owned operators, system integrators, and so on and so forth. So it's a very, very fragmented market. So it will lead to competition. Definitely, there will be competition. But what we are seeing is the big waves, which will drive the demand. For us, and probably for the whole satellite industry, firstly, the digital access, 4G, 5G, and the cloud-driven applications. Then government, Aero ISR, definitely will be a big segment where the growth will take place. And I think mobility as well, the aero side. I think we saw Euroconsult did some analysis with us that we, in the aeronautical side, we're seeing Asia probably leading the chart in aeronautical broadband growth and really having almost 40% share in the next 15 years on the connected aircraft. And the capacity demand, I think the experience now the consumer has at its home, they'll expect the same experience whether in land, whether on air or in water, and it's going to continue that way. And we see 5-fold increase in terms of capacity per aircraft.
I'd like to go back to the competition and how that's going to affect us question, which is I think what you asked. And I think there's been a lot of noise from the NGSOs. And I believe, NGSOs are bringing a lot of innovation into the market. Launch costs are being reduced. There's some incredible stuff being done with antenna design, playing with economies of scale. So I think that's really positive for the industry. But there's a lot of myth around these NGSO networks. And does the business case close? So I'm going to be a little contentious here. And what are their challenges? So, the first challenge is the regulatory environment. Are they going to get into places like China and India? Now, I'd say it's going to be tough for an American company to get into China with a LEO constellation. Other of the NGSOs may have relationships with India and it may give them access, but the 5G people are going after the Ka band that they uplink from, which reduces their capacity requirement. So there's a tough regulatory environment they've got to enter to have real global access. It's taken us 6 years to get IS-33E landing rights in India. A LEO constellation, the life of a satellite is 5 years. So there's that massive challenge. The life of the satellite's another challenge. They last 5 years. They're in a lot harsher environment than we're operating in our geo environment. They can't carry as much payload or as much power. And so after 5 years, you need to replace them. I think antenna costs are another area that create the business plan closing in a developing country really, really difficult. I think what Starlink have done with ST Microelectronics is fantastic. They've created electric beam forming antenna for $2,500 by placing $1 million number order on ST Microelectronics. And that's an amazing achievement. We never thought we could get electronic beam-formed antenna at that price point. But they're subsidizing it into the American market by, close to $1,900. So how long can that subsidy remain, and what can they get that price down to from $2,500? And I've read some reports that if they take it in-house, they may be able to hit, with volume, $1,000 per antenna. But that still is a lot of money for CPE for a consumer broadband market, especially in the developing world and even in the developed world. So I question, how does the antenna come into play? I think space debris is something that people are talking about a lot. If you look at phase 1 and phase 2 of Starlink, when you've got phase 2 up, you've got 12,000 satellites. There's only 20,000 things up there at the moment. So adding another 12,000 chances of collision, how you deorbit, do you follow the regulations come into question? There's lots of debate around that. But the last one, which I think the biggest one is the efficiency of these systems. They're global systems, okay? And 70% of the world is ocean. So they talk about so many terabytes, but the amount of capacity over land at any one time is a lot less. So we see that these constellations will only ever be able to achieve around 10% fill factors. So that really changes their business case. Now, if you drill that down further, Moffat and Nathanson just did a white paper on the 5th of April that we've had access to, and I've been reading, which just focuses on Starlink's connectivity in the USA. And it's done an analysis saying, so the USA represents 2% of the world's landmass. Because the Starlink antennas are at a 52 to 53 degree inclination, they get to see more of the constellation than you would in other places. So let's say it represents 3%. So at any one time, the USA can only see 3% of that constellation. Now, if you break that down further and you look at what the average person is using for broadband at peak at the moment, the study shows that at peak hours, people are accessing around 1.5 to 2 gigabits of data. And that translates to about a 2.5 to 3 megabit throughput at peak hour. So if you then look at, how many satellites are over the US at one time, the throughput of these satellites being 17 gigabits to 23 gigabits from what we see from the FCC filings. You then look 5 years ahead and consumption is going to change. People are going to consume more at average peak hours next year and the following year and the following year. The satellites will be able to provide more capacity as they further develop the antenna systems on these satellites. But this study has taken those things into account. And the final sort of part of this study says the total amount of consumers it believes that Starlink can connect, and it's from their analysis of the market, is anywhere between 300,000 to 800,000, which is only 1% of the broadband market in the US. Now, they've done it with the peak average, and they've also done it looking at contention. So you look at the capacity having only access to 3% of the satellites, the gigabit throughput, average peak hour and contention, and they're not even getting to 1 million customers. So that's the largest market that Starlink's looking at. So it's going to be a challenge how they're going to get to the $30 billion case that they talked about in 2015 that they saw a market for, and that's with 12,000 satellites. They've based that on phase 2 being implemented. We're not talking about phase 1, 4,500. They're talking about phase 2, 12,000 satellites in place and what the throughput is. So there's a whole lot of myth there. Whether their analysis is correct or not, I'm sure it will be discussed and debated. But it is one organisation that's gone and looked deeply into how much throughput do these constellations really provide.
Thanks. Thanks. So certainly some food for thoughts, and a good advertisement for reading this analysis. I would welcome everyone to have a look. And in practice, if I take it to Asia, so what will be important is consider what capacity shall be available where, how much, and in a given place, and between regulation and beams available in country and so forth. Here in this region. Christophe, in terms of your views, either actually the new geo capabilities and the NGSOs.
Yeah, just to comment on one point that was raised just now by Terry, is on the CPE cost. In my past life, I was involved in home gateways, selling home gateways to telco and pay TV operators, and if you get a Chinese manufacturer or a Chinese EMS to get involved into costing down the whole gateways that they will put at home, you'll be surprised, and get involved, you'll be surprised at the cost reduction that they will be able to achieve. So I will say that for the time being, they are keeping it in-house. Maybe they are trying to get the best product in, but as soon as they put it into the hands of large EMS in China, in Taiwan, and so on, I think we will be able to see a tremendous decrease in the cost of the gateway, which is obviously gateway at home. I mean, which I think is one of the biggest issues that they have on currently to have a profitable business model. So. And we know that there's a lot of things happening on this field with some other constellation which have actually gone into these guys to look into it. So, but after this, I think that there will be a segmentation, obviously, between ourselves and the LEO. Maybe they will be more in semi-urban areas, and we'll be looking more at the white regions, the ones that are not properly covered at all by fiber and so on. So I think there will be a time where there will be a proper segmentation between all of us, and there will be space for and market share for all the operators, I guess, at the end of the day.
Okay, thanks. I think we are already beyond 1 hour, so we may have to close shortly. And actually, I just realized at the start I forgot to introduce myself back on Revision as CEO of Euroconsult, so it's done before we close. But anyway, my final point, and I also sent to you by email a challenge. If you were in like 1 minute, I mean, we're out of COVID, hopefully. If we talk about the satellite market, within 3 years, even 5 years is a long time. With all the innovation coming in the ground segment, the new digital payload capabilities, other aspects, cloud partnerships you put in place. What could be just your view or describe the Asian Satcom market in 3 years, 3 to 5 years, in like 2-3 sentences maximum, maybe. Thierry, if you can take the challenge, and I'll play it with everyone.
Well, you're really challenging me, because
I'm trying to.
So look, I'll try and keep to your rules. I think it's going to be a lot. If we look at the 5-year horizon through software-defined payload, through 3GPP core, through universal modem, will be a lot more connected and a lot more important to the telco, and we will be more than the 1% of the telco. The other thing I'd say is, I think we'll see the emergence of even newer technologies such as HAPS going direct to device in deep rural areas.
Great. Thanks, Christophe.
I agree with this, and to add maybe 2 points, definitely more inroad into the consumer broadband. I think there's so many areas which are not being covered, and given the regions and the population in some large countries, it makes sense. The second thing I will add would be more business model related. I think that we are seeing shorter contract terms, and I believe that the business model may evolve in certain segments, more of on-demand kind of business compared to long-term contract that we see right now, unfortunately, maybe.
Thanks. Which goes a little to some of the comments maybe from Arch on the per gigabyte or more flexibility in the various business models, terms, and so forth. Okay, Arch, your view.
Yeah, so I feel the pandemic being added as a force majeure condition in all contracts, we're seeing it now. That will probably become mainstay. But I think we're bullish overall. On the Asian market, that this will be driven by 4G, 5G demand and the cloud applications. Mpower for us will be the mainstay. I agree with Terry. Leo's business case is very, very challenging, but we'll see a lot of activity. So there will be a lot of activity, a lot of innovation in the industry, which we are looking forward to. I think in terms of competition, obviously it will be intense, but I also see that we will have to, as an industry, compete with mobile operators on the K-band spectrum, because that is becoming a precious commodity that is being allocated to MNOs for 5G deployment.
Thank you. And I take from your comments, some trials on 5G, but 3 to 5 years out, while 4G is a big, obviously, capacity driver now. So 3 to 5 years might be where 5G and all the applications around might become a big play, I tend to think. All right. I think we're 1 hour and 8 minutes, more or less, if I'm right. So I would like to thank you very much for sharing your insights today. Very informative, at least I found. I hope it's the same for everyone listening. So very happy to have been with you here, and I would certainly invite you to connect to any APSCC webinar series that will follow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pacom. Thank you, Christophe. Thank you, Harsh. Thank you, Terry. A pleasure to have you all, and thank you for your time and your insights. Please do join us in the next of the APSCC webinar series for optical and quantum communications. That's the subject. We'll hopefully be seeing you shortly for that one. Please look at the schedule that's posted on apsccsat.com as well. And feel free to recommend your friends and colleagues register for the series as well. Once again, all of these are free of charge. So we look forward to seeing you again soon. Cheers.